Well, good evening to you, and welcome to this program of Walter Rodney Groundings. I'm your host, Dion Abrams, and on the program this evening, I have with me Brother Takuma Ogunse, and together we'll be talking about the regional and general elections, as well as other issues that may be current in Guyana. I want to welcome you to the program, Brother Trotman, Brother Ogunse.
It's always a pleasure to be here so that we could engage our viewers and our constituents.
Yeah, and to the viewers out there, it's a pleasure being with you here once again to talk about issues relevant to Guyana and the world possibly at large. Germane to us at the moment is the elections of 2020. And we have been discussing the recount over the past weeks. And I guess with just about 74 boxes left to be counted today, that possibly the wrapping up process should be taking place. But Brother Ogun, we spoke about the observer teams, the response of the OAS, the Carter Center's denial of entry. We spoke about the process itself, the count itself. But as we're winding down, we're finding that a number of issues are being highlighted that seems to be bringing the entire process into some measure of contention in terms of credibility. One of the things that has been highlighted, particularly by the APNU AFC coalition, is the fact that a number of persons who are not resident at the time of the elections are alleged to have voted, and a number of persons who are deceased also voted at the elections. How impacting is that on the whole process as far as you're concerned?
I want to say that we are in the critical 72 hours, I think. And the country is anxiously awaiting the final outcome of this long process. And the things that you mentioned and others, the various anomalies and irregularities, the missing of poll books, the absence of poll books and so forth, and counterfoils and numerous questionable happenings. Now, I think that those are important in determining the credibility of the elections, because the elections is a process. And the counting of the votes is only part of the process. But you need to know or to assure yourself beyond doubt that the vote cast in boxes are legitimately cast by the right voters, and that the whole process is consistent with the rules and regulations that GECOM outlined. And I believe that I can't see us coming to a judgment that the elections are credible without those anomalies and irregularities are addressed. And if those are addressed, then it would impact, the outcome of the elections. And I think it would create a more level playing field for acceptability. Because it is hard to agree, because the mandate that GECOM is carrying out this recount under, that was agreed by the president, the opposition leader, Mr. Barajagdi, and CARICOM and GECOM itself to its chair, was not a one-stage process to deal simply with tabulating figures. It was to address the question, in a more holistic way, and to deal with credibility issues. So I can't say at this stage if those credibility issues are not addressed, GECOM cannot be said to have been faithful to the mandate it got in terms of the recount process. And I think this is critical because if we are a divided country and if you want general acceptance of results, then you have to satisfy the concerns of both sides. And since those irregularities and anomalies and all those questionable behaviors go to the heart of the outcome of the elections, it has to be addressed. So it is extremely important.
You were saying that those things need to be addressed. Ralph Ramkaran is of the view that those things are not in line with the PPP, that those things don't matter. They seem to be addressing only the figures that are the outcome of the recount. And the recent pronouncements by some of the pundits, the international, well, we don't call them international, the USA and Canada and so on, seem to be urging or nudging GECOM in a direction that is saying that, well, look, ignore these things, look at the count. Now, how you're talking about a country that is pretty divided, people are aware that these discrepancies have occurred. How will that be when they're urging the populace and the parties to accept the recount, the figures that would eventuate from this process without dealing with the anomalies that have taken place?
No, it is clear that, look, this is a matter that we as Guyanese got to resolve of ourselves. Observers, diplomatic community, all of them could express the view. But in the final analysis, is we have to determine the level of impurity, the level of corruption, the level of fraud, rigging that we want to accept in our elections.
Okay.
And these matters have been with us for a long time. And my position is that Guyanese elections should be of the highest possible standards. That should be our aspiration. And every time we have like a dirty situation like this, it opened the doors for us to recognize the need to correct it. And we can't go down the road of consciously accepting fraudulent elections as a basis for unity of the country. It wouldn't work. And people doesn't seem to understand that Guyana is in a new dispensation and that the stakes for all stakeholders are very high. And what happened here will have profound effect on the livelihood of the entire country. And I can't see it make any sense in the context of our known electoral history that we as a nation would be allow ourselves to be dragged into a situation of accepting questionable and tainted elections as our standards. For me, it should be rejected, and we reach a point where we have to draw a line in the sand, and to say that if these elections, if we can't have a national agreement on what constitutes elections and that we could find acceptable, then we have to accept the consequences that follow. You can't have it both ways. You can't talk about wanting fair and free elections and then you don't have a united position on the standards that all of you will live by. And we can't allow international forces to determine those standards. They have their own interests, and once their interest is satisfied, they don't care. 6 months from now, if this country runs into problems, they can say there's an internal matter of being concerned with you. You have got to resolve your problem. So my position is before we get into deeper problem. Let us resolve it here and now. Here and now. So we have to reject any pressure on us to baptize tainted elections, fraudulent elections as our standards.
Now I hear you on that. Well, Dr. Henry Jeffrey did make the point in his column that GECOM really cannot say that it has done its work if it really does not address the problems that have been found in the elections. But those who are seeming to, well, particularly the PPP and its other associates, those small parties and so on, are seeming to hang on to the idea that GECOM doesn't have the mandate to address those issues, that all those issues are for an elections petition. I'm no lawyer. I can't argue much about that, but as a layman, what are your views in relation to that? Yeah.
You see, GECOM, my understanding is that when GECOM agreed to this recount, it agreed to recount in the context of a particular article in the Constitution that's allowed it to do everything that the leaders sign on to. That will be legal and constitutional. Therefore, I don't buy the argument that GECOM cannot address these matters. They're bound by the agreement that was signed, and in terms of natural justice, GECOM is not, they say GECOM is not a court, so GECOM got to go, okay, and bear in mind, that perceptions of the actions are important as their decisions. And they have to be careful that they don't come out of this with a perception that is counterproductive to the unity of the country. And I will argue that GECOM must act on those things, and to the extent that they can't act, there should be no decision. It is better that GECOM deadlock on these matters than GECOM takes the wrong decision, okay, that will re-establish or establish new parameters of fraud as the basis of our acceptance of results and the government coming out of those results. My understanding is the agreement and the article of the Constitution that the functioning does give GECOM the right to address those matters, because it is pointless.
The matter of degree, question of how much rigging has taken place, whether the rigging is just a little thing or a big thing, or it's something that can be bypassed, that all elections may have some degree of areas of, well, gray areas that should not determine the final result. In light of what we have seen happening in Guyana, even if we were to consider a matter of degree, can we say that the things that have been discovered in these elections are to the extent that they can be glossed over or ignored in terms of arriving at a decision?
No. And we have to, you see, Guyana have suffered for many years from the embrace of this, I don't want to call it this doctrine, okay, or this thing that no elections are 100% perfect, and therefore every elections will have problems. But once the problems is not grave enough to affect the logic or the outcome of the vote, then those elections are credible enough to establish a government. Now, we have been operating from 1992. Okay, before 1992, We had wholesale rigging, which everybody agree was bad. So we put that aside. 1992, as a nation, we say we're going to turn a page, a new page, on electoral rigging and fraud. The 1992 election that brought about change also had a number of questionable issues. Dr. Jagan, after the elections, had appointed a gentleman to be investigator. I can't remember the exact title he gave him, and to study the elections and to report. But Jagan never published that report because the report showed that the elections was not as free and fair as as being seen. But the importance of the elections, it was better than any we had before, and it led to a change of government. Now, from 1992 onwards, this country have been faced with the most sophisticated, fraud being committed by the PPP. Remember in 92 elections, they need the WPA and they need the TUF. They had to enter an alliance with those two parties in order to get sufficient parliamentary strength to pass the budget, so they don't have to negotiate with people on the budget, because they didn't have enough votes in 92 coming to the elections that they have a comfortable majority. After 92, the PPP make sure that they don't have the problem anymore, and they systematically work out a system to steal votes, to rig the parliament. And they were helped because of the demographics and the numbers. At that time, they had the numbers, that would guarantee them, winning the plurality. But winning the plurality alone doesn't mean you're in parliamentary comfort in relation to the budget. So their rigging was directed to get in sufficient votes, not to win the elections, because they win the plurality, but to rig the parliament. Now, and that rigging fall within the so-called international acceptability of irregularities and fraud.
Okay.
And in a country like Guyana, where the political differences between parties are a few thousands, if PPP, any party could thief 10, 15 votes on the 3,000 ballot boxes that we got, they steal the elections. So in terms of Guyana, we can but, given all the implications politically, ethnically, and everything, we can bat on that briquette that we have been batting for the last umpteen years. That at this point in time, this juncture, we accept that as a recipe for determining the government. No, we have to reject it now. As a nation, we have to say enough is enough. We walked the road many times, and this is even worse. What the people did here is worse than any other elections from 92 to now. So we can't accept it.
But what has the PPP done? Because if you were to read the news, some of the news that we're getting, you don't get the impression that the PPP has done any wrong.
Yeah, but that is not my business. The news. I don't concern with PP propaganda. PP propaganda is PP propaganda.
Yeah.
But the coalition have been systematically outlining the case, systematically highlighting all the irregularities and the anomalies and all of the problems. And we got the East Coast problem that we probably discuss later. This the PPP and their propaganda people will argue the way they argue. I passed the stage of warning with them. We are just a crunch point.
So from Region 1, we had the issue from the word go, missing documents. The point is that these people who are responsible, the ROs and the DROs and so on, for ensuring that the process was fair, that the process was transparent, that the things that ought to have been done based upon the training that these agents and presiding officers and all of these received, that these should have been carried out. Now you found that from this word go that in Region 1, for instance, that was flouted. And that trend has continued throughout the process. But still, we're getting the impression from those who seem to want us to accept what has transpired that these things are insignificant. Now, GECOM does intense training with its staff. They give them a manual that they're supposed to follow. They give them role play to ensure that they understand what is required of them on elections day, which means that all of the operatives in a polling station and those who are monitoring those within the polling stations should be au fait with what is required. And here we are at a recount, and all of the things, many of the things, sometimes in some instances, practically more than 90% of the things that they were supposed to carry out, that these things are not adhered to. And it's not to a small degree in terms of one small location or so on. This seems to
pervasive after
right. And we have these international people again, trying to insert themselves in a diplomatic way into our process to tell us that we must accept these things.
In a very undiplomatic way.
Well, you were saying,
but I don't even want to waste my time with them because this is our matter.
Right.
We're going to either drown or swim to safety on this matter. They in their country, they're safe. Mm-hmm. This is we matter. We got to address this. Now the problem we got in GECOM, we got to face these matters for the umpteen years. And let me start from 92 to now. GECOM have been divided at both at the level of the commission and at the level of the secretariat. Both parties have influences, in the organization, That is a reality we have to accept. It therefore means that each side has the possibility to use their influences where they need it to be used, to prevail in whatever way they may want to be prevailed. That is objectively the way in which GECOM organizes. GECOM have its rules, its regulations, but its people have to implement it. And in these elections, you got to understand, fraud and corruption is the same thing. It is clear that the PPP, apart from this political solidarity that they will get from some of the elements in GECOM, secretariat and commission, apart from that, the PPP have spent a lot of money to corrupt people. And unfortunately in Guyana, we don't have a lot of public officials who is above corruption. And it is easy when you pass in big money out to have people to get people to do the wrong things. And this is what have been playing out in GECOM. People have been paid to do the wrong things. But the problem is, you can't anticipate. When you plan a crime, you can't anticipate everything. And even if you anticipate everything, once you make a decision, inherent in the decision is some objective problems. And when the PPP were planning the scheme for these elections, because they're out of power now, they had some bottlenecks. And they planned, but they didn't expect that you would have a massive recount that would have unveiled all of the corruption. You see? So we have to recognize that, and we have to say as a nation, politicians must not benefit from rigged elections. And if the elections is that messy, then we have to recognize it for what it is and do the right thing.
But you were saying that the PPP did all these things. I just want to make this point because one commentator on Facebook was making the point that PPP is not out of power. They were in power for 23 years. How is it that they didn't do all these things when they were in power? How come they have this clout and ability to do it when they're out of power?
No, but she don't understand the country. They did it from 92 onwards, as I told you. They rigged all of those elections to get in the parliament.
No, well,
But as the demographics begin to change, the migration and so on, so, okay, and the defection, you know, when the government long for 23 years, even among your own constituency, you start to bleed, people get disgusted you. And 2011, you see what happened to them. And 2015, then they finally get, but they're doing it all the time. They do it all the time, but you can't, you won't prevail all the time.
okay.
You see? But this one here, okay, they learned their lessons from 2011 and 2015. And that is why they will fight like hell for the elections to be fought on the old voter list,
Okay.
the bloated list. And that is why we in the coalition was fighting to get a new registration list, because we knew that the PPP rigging machinery, okay, is synchronized with that list, and they've worked with that list for the greater part of the last 15 or 20 years, okay, and they have refined their business in relationship to that list. And that is why we were trying to deprive them of that. But of course, the court's ruling a certain way. So it is wrong for anybody to believe that the PPP, when they were in office, they didn't do what they're doing here. But they're in a difficult situation because to do what you do in the opposition is not as easy to do. It's not like when they're in government.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that you made that point. But the other thing is, because apart from the fight for the bloated list, there was also the fight for the reassigning of polling places.
Yeah.
Because remember the attempt, because of the knowledge that a lot of this skullduggery took place in private residences and so on, that GECOM had taken the position not to use these. And at the last minute, we had the PPP raising their voices and crying out that, you know, the polling stations would not be enough and that they needed to address the issue. Now, if we are to check to see the result of that, GECOM's decision to use some of these very places, we are now at a position where we have concerns in relation to 29 boxes so far in areas that are predominantly PPP strongholds. Now, these 29 boxes are boxes that have nothing except the ballots in them. All of the other stuff are out. Really, do the votes matter alone, or these are the things that are supposed to be in the boxes? Are they of importance to determining the veracity, the truthfulness of those votes that are in those boxes?
No, they're needed. I mean, the rules make it mandatory that those documents ought to be in the box, because it's from those documents you're able to verify the credibility of what is in the box.
Okay.
And that goes to the very soul, okay, of the process. So so if you have a whole set of ballot boxes in a particular area, a stronghold of a particular party, that shows that there were systematic attempts to make sure that those documents are absent from the box, it must raise the question that is deliberate fraud. It's not accidental. And on this matter, and we're talking about the low East Coast, and those are PPP stronghold. I mean, let us look at this thing very carefully. A deputy RO who seems to be a PPP supporter, Mr. Paul Jaising, I think is his name. He, out of the blows, now that the face of this crisis, come with a narrative that they receive instructions from some clerk close to Mingo, poor Mingo here, Mingo again,
Yeah.
telling them that they must not put these things in the ballot boxes and put it in some bag. Put it in some bag. Now, all them PPP representatives in the Lower East Coast would have known that that is the wrong thing. And if they do that, it would damage the party. And from the time they get the instructions, they would pick up the phone, call Freedom House, and they would start a ruckus, both in GECOM and outside GECOM. The fact that they never did that, the fact that it's only now at this last moment, they're reproducing this so-called narrative, convinced me. I ain't a God, but the PPP boasts that there's the best and more oiled and more organized election machinery in the whole English-speaking Caribbean, and I don't doubt it. They're very oil, grease, and experienced machinery. And I am saying, given what we know about the PP electoral capacity, they would not have allowed, okay, since they hear that, they would have taken over the whole streets, because that is important for them. Their failure to do that convinced me that they knew what they did, okay, but they didn't expect to be catched. So I don't buy this thing from Mr. Jai Singh. And GECOM have released, information that when they check with their people, they say a different story, say they never did that. But I don't want to get caught up with whether the GECOM people lying or they're lying. I'm a politician and I deal with the people for umpteen years. And I know that anytime any senior officer in GECOM or low officer in GECOM have called them people on the East Coast and tell them to do that. Don't put those critical documents in the box and put it in some bag and give me the people to know, and they will create a havoc in this country.
And it's not, say, one location or two.
No, right. That's what I'm saying. People create a whole havoc when the GECOM say you can't use cell phones. And you're going to tell me on a matter, instructions come out to GECOM that you people have, according to your narrative, that going to damage you to the extent you're going to stay for 90 days and shut your mouth. I would not have none of that. That's nonsense. They get caught and they must pay the price for it, one way or the other.
Okay, but again, I must refer to the narrative in some of the newspapers, the Kaichor News and so on, because they are claiming, well, it is in the news that some other DROs and so on debunked that claim, that they were instructed in that way. Now, the narrative being carried by some of the news outlets as aligned to the PPP is that that narrative was brought up by the CEO, and that he has brought no evidence, or he has not brought the people whom he alleged made that pronouncement that there was no such instruction given. But apart from that too, the other thing is that...
But not continue. GECOM said that invited
that's what I was going to.
Officers and so on, and they had no show.
They didn't go.
They didn't go. So that's something to hide.
Right.
But you see, my case, I don't want to get into whether the officers who lying from who ain't lying. Okay? I want to deal with PP on this matter that they would never ever,
All right,
having knowledge of that instructions, sit on it and do nothing for 90 days. I remember they have seen how the APM was arguing, so that even if they didn't do it immediately, okay, a few days after the elections, they had all of this long time when they see the emphasis we put to open their mouth. But only when they get caught, then they open the mouth of the narrative. I would not accept that. I don't even want to deal with the people on the ground. The people got to convince me and the nation that given the level of their expertise in these electoral matters, that they will sit for 90 days knowing the critical nature of that and keep the mouth shut. Never ever would I accept it. I don't want to deal with the other things. Let them come and tell me that this is what they do.
But the other thing, because even as we speak, GECOM is supposed to be deliberating on how to treat with those 29 boxes. I don't know what the decision has been, because before I left home, I got one source saying that the GECOM has decided not to count those, and then another news is saying that they have decided to tabulate from those 29 boxes. What is your view in relation to tabulation of those, or not tabulating them in the entire process?
Look, I don't know what decision GECOM made, okay? And I want to be very careful. I don't want to mislead the public as to what decision GECOM do in relationship to that. Now, I know it is a big problem. It's a big problem, okay? But we have to make up our minds, well, what rules we playing by.
Okay.
We can alter the rules as we go along. And if we want to stick to the rules, you have to stick to the rules. You can, you see, these are critical elections, and because I'm a candidate, I don't want to behave in a certain way in these debates. I don't want to put a certain kind of pressure on GECOM, because unfortunately, the pressure is on the chair. Because nothing in GECOM would have a unanimous agreement now on these critical matters. So eventually everything falls on her. And she's in a very unfortunate position. And I think that all of those problems is leading to me to a certain logic. And I hope before we do, at some point before the program ends, we got to look at the possible options that GECOM have. And I think in understanding the options, that problem will fit into some one of the options.
Now the populace, we've been waiting for over 90 days for results. Every day you get declarations, this party is claiming victory, the other is claiming victory. And I noticed some attempt, even recently, by some, agent, possibly more certainly from the PPP, attempting to incite Buxtonians to go down to GECOM and to begin to raise protest against these 29 boxes and whatever and so on. But as a politician who understands the dynamics of race and politics in this country, how will you speak to the people in general about dealing with the outcome of these elections?
Politicians have to stop speaking to the people, and the people should speak to the politicians. You see, we have a political culture where we emphasize leadership from the top, and we don't encourage leadership from the bottom. And to the extent that you don't do that, the body politics, in my view, becomes weak. And I would say the people need to begin to speak to the population, to the politicians. And I think the people would have been speaking to them because of this coronavirus. If it wasn't for this coronavirus epidemic, the people of this country would have been speaking to the politicians on both sides. But the coronavirus, have changed the engagement to some extent. But you're coming to a point where the people will have to speak their truth on both sides. Not only politicians telling people what to do. This is the juncture we at, because we all got to live with it. So the people at some point will have to speak their truth. And I'm saying people from both sides of the camp will have to come in the streets and speak their truth. And let us work it from there. Because
But
at the end of the day, we all got to live with the consequences. Not, and I don't think the politicians and the few leaders alone must make that decision.
the view that because of all the discrepancies uncovered, many people are saying that the concerns being raised and the whole idea of, you know, declaring these elections basically null and void, that it's an escapist approach that is being pushed by the APNU AFC because they are aware that they have lost the elections and all of these things. Do these people who seem to be outside of that position, do they really take into account all these things that you have said about credibility, about the concerns, about the process, the acceptance of marginal error? But we don't have marginal errors. We have major discrepancies that we must ignore these. That this is simply another attempt at rigging or remaining in power by the APNU AFC.
The PPP and their people will always argue that way. And there will be no meeting of minds on this matter.
Okay.
They will not change. That is their narrative, and they will stick to it to the end. The PPP is telling me they never rig elections. The hands are so clean and all kinds of things. You know, and Samuel Hines sit in the whole life of a parliament, okay, on the seat on to the AFC.
Yeah.
You know, and the man have the face to write a long, massive, you know, talking about the glory of the PPP and the fact they hand clean electorally. No self-criticism, no moral decency. But the point you see, GECOM, look, I'm a candidate in the elections.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, I will have a bias. I'm a political realist. But as a Guyanese, as a member of the African community, a whole, a devout long, I know the country. I know we people, even though we are divided politically, there is an underlying sense in the country. People rather unity rather than division. People. Okay? And elections are critical. And these elections are more critical than any other elections that we ever had. Because I'm telling you, these elections, whoever prevail, you can't move them. The PPP, we take 23 years to move the PPP. Barrow Jagda quite correctly tell me, once the PPP win for 40 years, you can't move them. So what he's telling you, once they win, you got PPP domination for 40 years. I take those things serious because it is potentially possible. Given the kind of money and given the PPP politics to corrupt. They will corrupt left, right, and center in this country. Every institution. And you will have a disappearance of formal democracy and rule of law and decency. You will have a whole corrupt mess as a country. And they could prevail for quite a long time in that situation. But there are some other important consequences that this oil and gas industry is opening up to the country. And we can't discuss it yet as a nation when we ought to. Whether we like it or not, whoever wins these elections, whoever is the government, even if it's the devil, Guyana economic development will develop at a rapid pace unprecedented in the history of the country. Not only that we will have oil wealth, but we will have the spin-off of other industries being developed in the country. And this is a very large country, and your resources are scattered. And anytime you see you have developments taking place at the interior, massive industries coming and so factories and so, we don't have population, okay, to satisfy the needs of the economic development in this country. And we have to bring in migrants. And we have to discuss whether we are sensible enough as a nation to have the necessary unity, to have the necessary laws to protect ourselves. Because I'm telling you, in 10 to 15 years, the migrants and the expatriates will be more than the African and Indians and Americans in the country. And with the electoral system, one man, one vote, we could be a minority of your own country. So why should we fight? There are people, the white people, them, they're planning a long-term domination of Guyana. They're far ahead of us. Why are we fighting over the electoral spoils here? Are we missing the critical issue that the country is at a point in time, if we don't have national unity, and we don't have togetherness, in 20 years, Guyana does not belong to us. We're going to be a minority in our own country. In some Arab countries, they pass laws. You're a migrant worker, you could come and work, but you can't own land in the country, you can't vote here. Now, these are matters we, as a small country in numbers, have to discuss and have unity on. And if we can't have unity on how best to defend our national patronage, where hundreds of thousands of our ancestors in slavery and indenture, the indigenous people almost get wiped out. And you won't tell me, in 2020, you won't tell me that we must accept politics and political system, okay, that expose the country, not simply about who win and who lose. You're exposing the country to destruction. You're exposing the younger generation to a situation that they will not be able to control because we prepare them for it. And for me, I am prepared to speak my truth, and I'm going to fight to the end for what I believe. I'm old enough. I think I owe it to the generation, the younger generation. A lot of people talk about young people, but these are the discussions you're supposed to have with young people. And if you have those discussions, you will know, regardless of what you think about the elections, you need a national solution. You need an executive power sharing, okay, that will bring the country together and give us a chance to act as a cohesive nation, regardless of what happened at these elections. And for me, you see, GECOM to me have three possible outcomes. And I'm being objective. As an APMU person, obviously I like a PPP person, I was glad for me party win. I was glad for GECOM rule at the APMU win. That's a partisan view. Now, objectively, looking at the reality of this mess before us and before GECOM, GECOM could either, on the basis of it, declare a winner. There's one option. The second option is GECOM could agree to nullify the elections. And the third option is GECOM could be deadlocked and is unable to make a decision. To me, objectively, those are the three options facing GECOM as a commission. Where it will come down, I don't know. But one of the unfortunate things in any of the three options, unfortunately, the chair, the sister chair, the madam chair, is the one who have to bail the cat. And it's very unfortunate to the lady. Very unfortunate. You know, and I have wrote in a letter that if I was she, I would not have damaged my reputation and take responsibility for this mess. The PUP say, I on the APMU side, a compromise, okay, and all kinds of things to tell she. And if I was she, when the critical time come, given the mess, I didn't cast no vote. Let the commission deadlock and let go back to the politicians in the court. And I would have maintained my personal integrity, and I would not allow myself to go down in history as the one who offended the African community, the Indian community, and who threw the country in unprecedented turmoil based on the decision I as chair make. Let the politicians in the court make the decision, spread the responsibility around the country at the different institutions. Don't take it personally, because that's how they entrap her. She's entrapped to make a personal decision with a casting vote, okay? That if she do, she get down. If she don't, she get down. And she's supposed to choose, okay, I think in this. to protect our integrity and to force the country political leaders and the courts and all our institutions to accept responsibility and build the cat collectively. That will be me position as the chair. But I can't make it for her.
Okay, I hear you. But I noticed that there is this rush to deliberate if the information is true on these 29 boxes in the Lusignan area and so on. The very area where Anil Nandalal was accused.
Oh, she got ID cards.
ID cards and so on. But I haven't heard, unless I've mistaken, any deliberation on what will happen to the discipline services votes that have been unstamped and so on.
All of those things have been resolved. And the APMU have not been signing on to a lot of those tabulations. So a lot of those tabulations come out. Okay, it don't have the blessing of the APMU. Some, because given the level of anomalies and irregularities and discrepancies, the APMU of AFC, the coalition, has taken the position not to sign on those. Because if you sign on those, then you give it some legitimacy. So all of those are matters got to be ironed out. And I don't know with a divided commission that they could resolve those matters. So me, I sing one logic. But it is not me for call it. Not me for call it.
All right, well, we only have about 5 minutes more or so. 10 minutes more. Okay. Right. So, all right. Good. So we are at this critical juncture. You have given your perception of the options that are out there, and you have basically highlighted a position, a way out for the chair, which seems pretty plausible to me. I mean, saving our own skin, because a lot of the people on the ground, when the chair makes decisions, they are making the point that she is trying to save her skin. She doesn't want to be sanctioned by the international community. She wants to hold on to her visa. These are comments that are coming from the ground. All right? So that perception is out there. And that has been going back and forth based upon decisions that have been made. So the idea of throwing the options back to the court
And the politicians.
They
create the mess.
Yeah.
It is the courts and the politicians that create this mess. Because we should be fighting these elections on a new voter list. I mean, courts are not perfect places.
Yeah.
And I not want to knock the judge, because everybody got him to do the best, and I think the judge gets the best shot. But objectively, if we didn't have a bloated list, we might end this crisis. So the court got to accept some moral responsibility.
So, no, that court has ruled. The matter is still unresolved. But this matter of the list, even if we are to proceed to the next point, we still have that decision of the court to deal with.
Yeah. You see, it depends upon what GECOM decide, because at the end of the day, GECOM decision was important. Whether it's a right or wrong decision, this thing will boil down to GECOM decision. And how people, all the various stakeholders respond to GECOM position. And GECOM has to, in another 72 or another 4 or 5 days the most, have to give a decision one way or the other. One of them 3 options. And when that is done, then any other thing will kick in.
But in the future, this court decision that has us at this position with this list, the challenge to that position that was put out by the court, are we moving forward with that?
I don't know. I am not the people who push the challenge. You see, I basically have passed all of that, man. I passed all of that. I think the Guyanese, we reach a point in this nation at this historical juncture where we know all what we do to one another, we know all what the white people do to we develop some aspirations which we call national aspirations. We say we want to live together in peace and so. And if anybody cross the border, we want to fight together as a nation. I, as an African person, whom my population is small, if war come, I the majority soldiers, I gotta go in front there. I ain't own nothing much. I ain't own much in the economy, but I gotta go and die there. And when I go and die there, I mean numbers get smaller. And then we come back to elections. You with the economic strength, I less numbers in the military. You win me again. Look the Amerindian position. On the basis of Amerindian numbers, they can never get any significant political clout in a political system that's based upon one man, one vote. We will continue the historical discrimination and oppression of the indigenous people if we stick to the Eurocentric model, okay, of democracy and elections. We have to find a way to give the Amerindian community more power in parliament and in the executive than the numbers could give them in the elections. This is the challenge as a people who come out of colonial experience, who have been exploited, slavery and indenture, have a duty to the indigenous people. And if we can't, as African Indians, resolve problems among ourselves, we will never give justice to them people. And the so-called nation that we want to build will be a fraud. It will simply be social and economic and political oppression. And that is the construct the colonial masters leave us with. And independence, we should reorganize that. We have failed to do it.
Okay.
And this is the moment of reckoning where we do our perish. I am clear.
So, what about us voting for a president and then having the fight for the parliamentary seats?
I don't think there is any condition to discuss that. If we can't even discuss how to deal with the basic rules that we agree for this at an elections, those are things for later. Mm-hmm. And we can't begin to address those things unless we reach a point where we get some executive power sharing, okay, for some period, and we get some national healing and reconciliation, and we begin to feel a sense of togetherness in the nation, then we could work whether we want separate, in the future, separate parliamentary elections, some presidential elections, so. But we are in no condition to discuss those things, and we don't have time.
All right. Okay. All right, well, time is catching up with us. But as we wait, we ask that, let the peace prevail, let GECOM do the work that it has to do. And we're hopeful that, that it doesn't lead to any acts that are basically going to throw us back years. But the other thing, before we close, teachers and students are asked to go back to school, common entrance and to CXC. And that seems to be a major concern. I shared on Facebook was it France or one of those countries where they send the children back to school, and there was a bloom in the spread of the COVID-19 virus among the students. We are putting our students in a country that doesn't have a public health system that is as efficient as those developed countries, and we're asking our children to go back into them for a month and beyond, because they have to go back to prepare for the exam and then to write the exam and all of these things. I don't know if you have any final...
I mean, we just at the end of the program. I think that the people who in the sector, the teachers and so, they have to raise the voice and make it matters. Decisions are made, it could be unmade. That's my attitude towards it.
Okay. Well, the voice of the union was not really respected.
But if the teachers don't turn up, you can't get in. This country, people are learning to use the clout.
Yeah, I know. I was of that view too. But one man, if I stay home and everybody else.
But the union got to instruct the people.
Yeah. But they're not taking, the CXC is pushing this idea that the exams have to be held because for them it's a money-making matter. They've received the people's money.
But we have to save lives.
Yeah, that's not a concern. Well, let's see. And then the other thing is they're telling the children that you can write the common entrance if you want to, but if you don't, we're going to put you at a school in your district closest to you.
This is a special program.
You know, life has to go on, and we're hopeful that this decision doesn't lead us into a catastrophe. All right, but it's been a pleasure having you on the program, and to the people out there, we await GECOM's decision. The process is coming to an end, and we're hopeful that we all find whatever the eventual deliberations would have produced favorable to us as a country. All right, but do enjoy the rest of your evening. I look forward to being with you next week. By that time, we should be able to be talking about the eventual outcome of this process. But do enjoy your night. Thanks for being on the program again, Brother Takuma. Do have a good night.
It's a pleasure to be here.